Today, freshmen, I'm going to take you through a instructional read aloud of literature analysis mentor text number 1. For you, you're going to want to go and download this mentor text from Schoology and then upload the file. So you're going to go ahead and choose file and then find it. It'll pop up right here. Select it and then click open. I've already brought it in and it's in my library already. You're going to want to then tag it, and you're going to want to create a new tag called LA Mentor Texts. You do that by clicking in here and typing LA Mentor Texts, and then click the Create New Tag, and then you'll select the tags that you want to apply to that document. Make sure that you have the document selected. So once you have that, you can go ahead and open it up. You're going to do the before reading question, where you're going to answer what good writing techniques would you predict a lit analysis essay should have. You're going to do a rose comment box on that line. You can go ahead and pause the video now and then do that question and then unpause it and come back. Now that you've done the before reading question, let's look at our during reading. These are a little different than our last mentor text because we're looking for different things. You're going to highlight in yellow for the thesis statement. There's only going to be one sentence in the whole piece that should be highlighted yellow. You're going to highlight in tan quote sandwich elements. So a quote sandwich is what we do when we're getting ready to quote. So we prep for the quote, so we summarize and make sure that the reader understands where in the piece we're talking about. We then deliver the quote. And remember that a quote is different than dialogue. Dialogue is when a character is speaking in a story. Quote is when we're taking something from another piece of writing and using it as evidence. And your quote could be dialogue in this case, since we're quoting from a story, but it doesn't have to be. And then you cite the quote. You do your MLA citations so that we know where you got the quote from. So we're going to do those in tan. We're also going to highlight in green analysis, and then we're going to do tan comments all over the place for good writing techniques. I want you to follow along with me as we do these noticings. And if you need to pause the video to then go make your annotations, that would be great. I would recommend that you make 2 windows on your screen so that you can see my video and the text at the same time. And that will probably really help you so you don't have to keep switching back and forth. But if you need to pause the video while I'm going through, you need to back it up, whatever you need to do, that's totally okay. So the first thing, before we even start reading, I've already started noticing some things. So I'm noticing that right here, we have a heading, and I made note in a tan comment. So there's the student's name, it's the teacher's name, the class and the period, the date. They should also have the assignment down here, so that's wrong, but we have a heading. We also have what we call a colon format title. You'll notice that there's this colon right there. Before the colon, we have the creative stuff, so no room for freedom. After the colon, we have the harsh equality and Harrison Bergeron, and it shows us what text we're working from. And it gives us a little idea of the topic. And we have that colon in the middle. You'll notice that most mentor texts in the lit analysis arena use this colon format title. And you'll notice that title of the story is in italics because titles of everything are in italics. So let's go ahead and start reading. Equality is great in moderation, but take it too far and you get something very close to the situation in Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. This sentence is called the fluff. We're easing the reader into the essay because we don't want to punch them in the face with our thesis statement in the first line. We have to get them acclimated. It's like walking into a pool. You don't jump in to a really cold pool right away. I mean, I guess you could, but it's harder to do that. It's nice to just slowly move in. It's the same with our essays. So that's what this sentence is doing. The year is 2081, and all people, no matter their race, gender, or strength, are equal due to the laws implemented by the new U.S. government, and no one is doing anything about it. The story's namesake, Harrison Bergeron, is the exception. He valiantly defies the bully that the United States government has become. His parents, however, Hazel and George, are the opposite. They sit idly while their country openly oppresses anyone and everyone just for veering from their standards. This is a summary of the short story. I've made that note right here. And that's important to have in your intro to kind of help the reader understand the story if they haven't read it before. You don't need to summarize every single thing that happened in the story, but this author does summarize. It's a really good summary. It's succinct, and it helps us to know what the story, what's going on in the story. So then, Kurt Vonnegut Jr. uses the symbols of the television in the background and the varied handicaps that the citizens are forced to wear and the dance between Harrison and the brave ballerina to convey that too much equality hinders our individuality and our freedom. So this is my comment, and if you want to pause and write something similar to that, that's fine. What's going on in this thesis is a lot of things. This is the thesis statement. That's why we're highlighting it in yellow. We identify the author. We also identify that we're going to be talking about symbols in this piece. And they specifically want to discuss 3 symbols. They want to talk about the television, they want to talk about handicaps, and they want to talk about the dance. Those are the 3 things that they think are symbolic. And the way they've formatted it, we know that television is going to be first, then handicaps, then dance. So in their 3 body paragraphs, we're going to have the first one's about television, the next one's about handicaps, and the last one's going to be about dance because of the way they formatted. And if they had wanted to switch those around, like they wrote about dance first, they would just have to switch it in the thesis statement. And then the last thing is that they say it conveys that too much equality hinders our individuality and our freedom. That's their theme. That's their thematic statement. That's what they're saying Kurt Vonnegut is trying to tell us. So it's a really good, succinct, well-constructed thesis statement. So we know exactly what we're going into when we get into this paper. So Vonnegut includes a very subtle symbol in the setting to hint at the lack of focus the characters have. That is a transition/topic sentence. So I made that note right here. And having a good transition sentence is just like having a good fluff sentence at the beginning of your intro. It eases you from one paragraph to the next. So George and Hazel Bergeron spend the entirety of the story sitting on the couch and watching a television, George only rising to grab a beer from the kitchen. When he returns, Hazel has been crying, but she can't remember why. She simply says, this right here is all prep. We're prepping for a quote in our quote sandwich. So this author summarizes a little bit so we know what part of the story we're talking about. And then we prep so that we can get into a quote. This is a transitional phrase to get us into the quote. And then here's the quote. Something real sad on television. It's all kind of mixed up in my mind. So that's all delivering the quote right there. And then they have this Vonnegut, and it's on page 7. Yeah, and this is the proper MLA citation for when we're doing this. And they have a comma. They changed the punctuation mark here because this is not the end of their sentence. This is. So they put a period right there. And then they put the author's last name and the page number. You don't need anything else in that parentheses, just those 2 things. So that's their citation. That's our quote sandwich. We had prep the quote, we had deliver the quote, and we have cite the quote. So then we have analysis. This very clearly symbolizes the short attention span of the couple and the danger of it. It's almost as if the government is brainwashing them, taking care to make sure that any individual, creative or otherwise, original thoughts don't stay for long in the slowly emptying minds of their citizens. I noticed that they used a semicolon. They used it correctly right there. So that's really cool. But this is some analysis. It's not super deep analysis. They can go into much more depth, but it is analysis. They're explaining to us what that quote means and why it's a symbol and what it symbolizes. And they're trying to help us connect it to that thesis statement. So that's paragraph 1. Body paragraph 1, second paragraph. Now we're into this next one. In Harrison Bergeron, everyone has personalized handicaps. For example, if your intelligence is above average, you are forced to wear a mental handicap. Once again, that's a transition or a topic sentence. When explaining this, Vonnegut describes, this is a prep for a quote. It was tuned to a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. That's the quote. And then we have the Vonnegut 1. That's the citing of the quote. That's the citation. Basically, whenever someone with above average intelligence even tried to think of something smart, witty, or against the way the government wants them to think, their thoughts would. So that's another prep for a quote. We didn't do any analysis. So they're doing a quote and then they're going to go right into the next quote because they want more. This right here says flee and panic like bandits from burglar alarm. You'll notice that this word has brackets around it. And the reason that they're putting brackets around that is they changed that word. It may have been capitalized. It may have been a different word. They wanted flee with a lowercase. And so they put brackets around it to show that they changed that word. And then this is the quote that they're quoting from. This is the citation. Then we get into our analysis. Vonnegut uses this simile for a few reasons. One of the reasons is to show how in this society, citizens are viewed as criminals if they try to use their individual gifts, as if they are stealing something from the authority. Another reason is to reveal just how overbearing this government is. When someone does something as simple as think up an original thought, they are punished by having their thoughts scattered. Other examples of the handicaps are masks to hide beauty, bags of birdshot chained to dancers to control their grace, and weights padlocked into people's necks so they can't take advantage of their strength. As shown above, these handicaps are a clear symbol of a government that is purposefully wiping out every person's individuality and replacing their freedom with various ways to weigh them down. This is the analysis. This is good analysis. There's deep depth here, and this author does a great job of explaining all this stuff. And this is a really good section of analysis. But you'll notice how they set up two quotes and then they analyze, and that's perfectly fine. All right, so the last body paragraph, and then we'll have our conclusion. So once again, dancing is truly one of the most beautiful ways to show self-expression. That's a transition and a topic sentence. When Harrison breaks into the television station and sheds his handicaps, he declares himself emperor and says that the first woman to rise will be his empress. A ballerina gathers the courage to stand, and Harrison takes her dancing literally. Vonnegut described their moment as followed. So once again, we're prepping for a quote. You can see how this sentence is getting us into that quote. So they reeled, whirled, swiveled, flounced, capered, gamboled, and spun. They leaped like deer on the moon. They have two quotes there, and they're delivering them. And then we have Vonnegut 6, and that's the citation. So then we have our analysis. To me, this shows how when the courageous young dancers leave their handicaps and the oppression of the government behind, they become almost weightless, free of the constraints that have been holding them down for so long and graceful beyond compare. It's okay analysis. It's just a little bit of analysis. And then you'll notice that they're starting to prep for another quote right here. Sadly, this duet is cut short by the handicapper general Diana Moon Glampers. She shoots Harrison and the ballerina, and they were dead on before they hit the floor. So we prepped for a quote, we delivered a quote, and then we cited it. Even though it was on the same page, we're still citing the quote because we're just always going to cite. And then we have a little bit more analysis. This symbolizes the harsh tyranny of a government with too much power, a government that cannot even appreciate individual beauty. The dancing couple was finally free, only to be shot down in a very literal sense. This whole scene ends quite abruptly, and the TV that was showing everything in the Bergeron home burns out seconds after their son is shot. This is very scary to me. The people of America have been reduced to clones that can't think independently for long enough to even begin to question their government's motives. This is some decent analysis. It's not the best analysis in this paper, but it's also not the worst. And you'll notice how they, did the quote sandwich, and then they analyzed, they did another quote sandwich, and then they had more analysis. And that's perfectly fine as well. So this is the conclusion. Many things in Harrison Bergeron support the argument that too much equality leads to loss of freedom and the characteristic differences that make us human. The television, the handicaps, and the dance are some of the main symbols used to convey this theme. This is a restate of the thesis statement. You'll notice it has all of the elements that the thesis statement had before, just restated in a different way. The message of this story is important because it shows how awful too many attempts to make everyone equal can be. Would you want to live in a society like this? A society that shames being different? I think not. And they used a semicolon right there. So that's the conclusion. Really good conclusion. Then, if we continue to scroll down, we have their works cited page. So you'll notice that the works cited page is all on its own. A works cited page is required. Anytime you're quoting from a text and you're doing the in-text citations, you have to have a works cited page so that the reader can come down and look up the story if they want to, or whatever you're quoting from. A works cited page is always on its own page. You bold and center this, and it's required under MLA standards. This is the entry, and you'll notice that right here, that second line has a hanging indent. This is hanging over this, and you have to do that because it makes it easier to see where an entry starts in our works cited page. So if you had multiple entries, that hanging indent really helps us. Then we have our after reading question. You don't need to do